Hey there. My name is Emmanuel Gonzalez. Most people know me simply as Manny. I am a son of God. I am a faithful Catholic. I'm also attracted to guys. And my journey has been one that's been messy, it's been beautiful, it's been painful. But nonetheless, this is my story, okay? So I come here just bearing it, and I also come here just disclaiming that, this is my experiences. This is the way the Lord spoke to me and the way he continues to speak to me in my life. And so maybe there are some things I say that will resonate with you, maybe none of it will, but regardless, I'm just here today to just share a little bit about what that's looked like for me. Being a guy who loves the Lord, but who also is drawn to other guys and who's attracted to other guys and who is trying to navigate what that looks like as a disciple of the Lord who wants to remain faithful to the Catholic Church, to biblical teachings on sexuality, but also who is human. So with that, I think we can start with where I'm from. I'm from Dallas, Texas, yeehaw, born and raised. Most people don't guess that because I have earrings and a mullet, and so people think I'm like from the north or something like that, but I'm from Dallas, Texas, born and raised. I was born to a very faithfully Catholic family. My mom and dad, they're human, and they actually tell me to say that disclaimer often, that they're human, so they're imperfect, and sure, they failed in ways, but like overall, they have been and are phenomenal parents to me. Both love the Lord, love each other, and love me and my siblings very well. So I grew up, relatively normal childhood. I'm a middle child, right? So my mom and dad have been happily married, all throughout my childhood and my life. And then there's 5 boys and 1 girl. My sister is the firstborn in the top, so she's, the Lord took care of her. She's still the queen of all the relatives, and then there's all the boys, and I fall right in the middle of that. And I have one brother in heaven as well. So that's a little bit of my family, like logistically what we look like. We were born and raised on the Catholic faith. Again, my parents are very faithfully Catholic. My dad actually used to teach RCA classes at our local parish. So he used to, for those who don't know, those are the classes that involve when people are looking to get baptized into the Catholic Church. That is when they are taught just the teaching to the faith and prepared for baptism. And so my dad helped with that. My mom also would help with that. So we were raised literally, not just Mass on Sundays, but like frequently we would be at church for classes, because my dad was teaching, or we'd be hanging out with church friends or whatever. Like it was actively, the Catholic faith was instilled in me from a young age. My parents did a pretty good job catechizing me or teaching me in the Catholic faith. And that was the same with all my siblings, right? We were all raised on the faith. So growing up, I definitely had a good idea, I guess, of who Jesus was, right? It's kind of that classic cradle Catholic thing you hear. It's not the case for everyone, but for a lot of us, of like, we didn't have any problem learning about Jesus or knowing about Jesus, but we didn't know him personally, right? Like I knew of Jesus, the person of Jesus of Nazareth, his Catholic Church that he instituted. I knew all these things. But when it came to actually personally Manny Gonzalez, knowing the person of Jesus Christ and having a relationship with him, I did not. And that went on for years, which I'll get into as we kind of unpack this. But yeah, so I was raised on the faith. I was actually raised in a Catholic school environment as well. So I was brought up in Catholic education. So my early years were being brought up in Catholic private school. It was boys and girls co-ed, but we were separated though too. So it was like, I was mainly with boys for most of the time. However, we'd sometimes see the girls and I don't know, like, tease them and whatnot. But mainly I was basically at an all boys Catholic private school for the most part. That's what it felt like. And I would say for me in specific, again, I had a very regular childhood. No particular, sexual abuse from my childhood, no particular trauma, relating to like physical abuse or anything like that. Again, it was brought up very healthy for the most part, human, so there was brokenness, but it was healthy. So I want to set that context as we then go into when I first recall being attracted to guys. So from my recollection, like my first memory, I think very distinctly of being attracted to guys was around like 5th grade for me. So when I was around like 12 years old. I remember it was that ripe age where everyone's hormones are just everyone's starting to express their hormonal realities, okay? So the guys were like going on about all these girls they thought were cute, all these celebrities, whatever, just like going on about it. And I remember when these guys were like my peers, my classmates, when they were talking about these girls they thought were cute and their crushes and, their Jessica Simpson backgrounds or their, Ashley Simpson. I don't even know which Simpson, either Simpson backgrounds on their phones and how beautiful they found these women to be. I remember like thinking to myself, like, I do not feel that way towards these girls that everyone's talking about. Like I can like acknowledge that they're beautiful. Like I can see that objectively, but like I'm not like sexually aroused. I'm not like experiencing like butterfly. Like I don't feel that like everyone else feels. And that was really scary for me. Especially being brought up in a Catholic home. My parents didn't necessarily say anything that made me think, like that gay people were abominations or that, right, like I was doomed for, like it wasn't like anything, maybe there were microaggressions along the way, but for the most part, it's not like anything drastic was said or done to me that made me think I was an abomination or I was destined for hell or whatever else I assumed at the time because of my sexuality. It was just almost like innately, I just felt this like shame and this guilt of like that I carried on myself, like this burden. And I kind of describe it as like this threefold spiral of hatred, okay? I hated God, for starters, because I was so scared of him. I was like, he was so distant to me. Again, he was someone I knew of intellectually, but personally, not only did I not know him personally, but I also didn't think he wanted to know me because of my sexuality, because of, me being attracted to guys. I was like, God wants nothing to do with me, and he must have broken the mold when he made me because I'm so different than everyone else. So I hated God for that. I hated the Catholic Church because I saw her teachings to be bigoted and outdated and honestly just stupid. And and also, to be frank, there were some Christian witnesses along the way that I saw that didn't necessarily represent Christ the best. And so it was also like I hated the church because I thought that they hated people like me. And so in turn, I hated them. So I hated God, I hated the church, and ultimately I hated myself, I think, because I thought that for some reason I deserved this, that somehow I had done something to merit this experience of mine that seemed so drastically different than everyone else and so categorically worse than the fellow person in the pew. And so I hated myself for it. And this really spiraled me into this deep, I think, into deep self-hatred and deep isolation and repression, where I kind of like operated from this mindset of like, nobody can know. This is my big secret that nobody can know, not a soul on this earth can know. So instead of letting people in and letting people know what's actually going on in this heart of mine, we're just gonna act like it's not there. We're gonna repress it. We're gonna bury it down. We're gonna get back to it later at some point. Fun fact, I had this like really genius master plan that I was gonna tell nobody until I got to college. And then what was gonna happen was as I was like getting onto the plane to get to my college campus, or as I was getting into the car to drive to college, whatever, I would like it would be this super dramatic like moment where I'd be like turning back around to my parents and be like, Mom, Dad, I'm gay. And then I would like step in the car and never have to talk to them about it again, and I could go live my life. And like that was my master plan. Obviously it didn't work out as that, and we'll get to that. But so anyway, I had this plan though that was basically like, one day we'll get to this, but for now we're just gonna put it in our little compartmentalization box. We're gonna put it up there. Instead, we're just gonna put on a different front so that nobody asks questions about what's going on. And so for me at the time, it felt like being a 12, 13-year-old boy. It felt like I can be a class clown because I know I'm charismatic, I know I'm anime, I know I'm fun, I'm funny. So that's what I did. I like kind of had this mindset that if I can make people laugh, if I can make my peers and my classmates laugh, then nobody would actually ask questions about like, how is Manny actually doing? Like, how are you, like, how's your heart actually? Like, what are you actually going through? Not to say per se at that age people are having those kind of conversations anyway, but regardless, it was like, I wanted to make sure though that that was not happening. And so that's what I did. I started playing just all the pranks that the guys wanted me to do. I mean, like literally like anything the guys wanted me to do, any prank, regardless who I was hurting in the process, I remember I was so mean to some of my classmates. I bullied people. I was mean to teachers. I just did whatever I could do to just make people laugh, make people like me, so that nobody could actually know what was going on. And eventually it got me actually kicked out of my first Catholic private school that I was at for a while in northern Texas. So I get kicked out of this first Catholic private school because of just all my, just pranks added up. It was too much. So I get kicked out. I get sent to a new Catholic private school for 7th grade. So at this point, I'm like 13. And again, it was the same thing where I keep navigating from this place of like, again, I'm not gonna tell anyone, not mom, not dad, nobody. Nobody's gonna know. Keep it to myself, gonna make people laugh so they're all happy. I can be repressed and on my own in the corner. No, we're all good. Life is good until I get to college and then I can come out and nobody has to worry about anything. So I continue this into 7th grade and it was just the same patterns, the same rebellion, I guess, of just like, in terms of like acting out, pissing off the teachers, and eventually it's same thing happened. I get kicked out of another Catholic private school. So at this point I have 2 Catholic private schools under my belt. I'm on the wanted list at this point for the Catholic school system in North Texas, like crazy. And I remember there was one point after I'd gotten expelled from the second Catholic private school, and my parents, specifically my dad, I remember he took me out and he just very kindly was like, son, like what is going on? Like, do you need us? Like, what can we do? Like, what's wrong? And I remember even then, I was just so afraid of how they would respond. I had this like mentality like they would hate me, that my parents would hate me, they would disown me. And again, they never even communicated those things per se. It was just like this inherent thing from like, maybe it was from previous people I'd heard with those experiences or what, I don't even know. I felt unsafe and I felt like I had to hide. And so I remember my dad asked me this and I was just like, no, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. And so they kind of were like, look, we love you. We've been trying to figure out what's going on, but like we have no choice but to send you to public school at this point because we can't keep dropping money on you for you to get kicked out of all these Catholic schools. And so my 7th grade going to 8th grade year of middle school, so around 13, 14 years old, I eventually went to public school. Which everyone hears and they, especially in the church world, everyone's like the big dun dun dun, or everyone's like, oh my gosh, that must be what screwed you up. And it's like, no, like actually I will say I'm thankful for a lot of what I got in public school because I did have an exposure to different people, to different mindsets, different belief systems that actually I think in the grand scheme of things were really healthy to be exposed to and to not be sheltered from entirely. So I want to preface with that, but I did end up going to public school. And again, though, I operate from the same mindset of like, nobody can know. I'm not gonna tell people. I'm gonna be very under the radar. I was still really depressed, lots of self-hatred, lots of repression. Again, all because of just this pressure of like, I can't share with anyone what's going on. I have to stay buried. I have to stay hidden. Like stay in the dark. Like that would depress anybody. Like that would make anyone feel bad about themselves, right? To like not feel like you can come forward with the authentic reality of your heart and your person. Like that's depressing. And that's depressing for anyone, regardless of sexual orientation or experience of gender. But yeah, so I ended up kind of cruising through 7th and 8th grade, my first 2 years of high school as well, continuing public high school. And again, same thing, I just was cruising through. I didn't have many friends. I was failing a lot of my classes. I was really bad at school. Again, it was just because, just objectively, I was depressed and I was running for myself and I was angry and I was resentful. And yeah, it was just not a good deal for young Manny. But then things, I think, really started changing. Actually, I want to preface that while in public school, especially in high school, when I was like 13, 14, 15, like those like first years of high school, I did start to get exposed to just like different ideas, right? So especially regarding like sexuality and just like what that looks like in the context of humanity. And, I started getting more and more introduced to like different things that were definitely intriguing to me, but nonetheless, I don't want to paint it like they also made significant impact. Like I also kind of already knew about that anyway. Like I knew what gay people were prior to going to public school. I knew like that RuPaul's Drag Race was a TV show prior to attending public school. Like it's not like I wasn't already exposed to these things. However, it was interesting that as I got to public school, I did get to start to hear perspectives that were different than the ones I previously had heard, right? Like I started to hear people actually like not immediately being like, ew, gross, yuck, we don't want anything to do with these people or with this top. It was like I started getting introduced to that. And I think to some degree, actually, that kind of made me feel a little more like, okay, not everyone feels like I'm garbage, you know? Even though, again, per se, it wasn't like people were telling me I was garbage to begin with, but it was like it opened my eyes to something. So nonetheless, I want to put that out there. So anyway, I would say things really started, I think a turning point in my story was when I came out to my parents. At least for my generation, this is pretty common, but my dad used to do this thing where he used to do the spontaneous phone checks, right? Where he would just without warning ask me for my phone, and it was just to, again, go through it, make sure I wasn't like looking at porn or doing anything crazy, when in actuality I still was looking at porn, I just knew how to hide it from him. But yeah, it was like just the basic phone checks to make sure I wasn't doing anything crazy. And I remember one day, my dad, it was my junior year of high school, so at this point I was probably like 15, 16 years old. My dad asked me for my phone randomly. And I realized on my phone, actually, it was not gay porn or anything like that particularly that I had on my phone. It was actually a message to a friend from youth group. They were the first person I ever came out to. It was somebody who I knew loved Jesus, loved the Catholic Church, but who I also knew loved me. And I remember I messaged her. It was actually two girls. I messaged them, and I actually found these messages a couple years ago, and it was heartbreaking to read. But I messaged them, and I just kind of like at wit's end was like, SOS, like, I think I'm gay. And I literally used this word. I was like, and I know I'm destined for hell. I know I'm destined for hell, and I know God hates me. But I don't know what to do about this, because I like think I love God, and I think I want to, like, I think I love him, but I don't know what that means for someone like me. And I know that he doesn't like me, and he doesn't like what I would otherwise be doing. And I don't know what to do about that. And I just like spilled my heart and all my fears, and it was like all this, like, just vomiting to them, like just all my fears and the resentment, all this that I've been bottling in for years. And they spoke such life into me, or at least it was something that was so unfamiliar that I never heard before. Specifically regarding just like God's love for me and his desire to be in relationship with me and to be in communion with me, and that that the church doesn't hate me. And like these basic truths that I think we take for granted, but I had never heard. And again, to no one's fault. It's like my parents told me opposite. It's not like they told me that God hated me or that the church hated me. It was just like, it wasn't reiterated to me specifically that people like me, that people attracted to the same sex, that people who are struggling with their gender, you know, or just this umbrella of people were actually like wanted by the church, and that God actually doesn't hate them. He really loves them and died for them too. So I remember I was so intrigued by this message, and I screenshotted it on my phone because I was just, again, it was something so new to me, and specific to me. And I knew my dad was gonna find those messages, those screenshots of that conversation on my phone. So I pulled my dad and my mom into their bedroom. It was like midday, the sun was still out. I remember it was like, okay, look, I'm Hispanic, okay? So we can be a little dramatic, okay? And just me as a person, even Hispanicness aside, the Hispanicness only elevates the drama. Like on top of that, just as a human person, unfortunately, but fortunately, God made me a little animated. And so I remember it was like instant tears. Not to invalidate that, because also totally valid. I was going through a lot, but like instant tears, telenovela, like we are crying. Like I was like, your lives are never gonna be the same. Like my mom and dad were looking at me like, what is this kid doing? Like, is he with like a terrorist group? Like, I don't know what's going on. And I just like instantly was like, Mom, Dad, like I think, like through tears actually, but I was like, Mom, Dad, like I think I'm gay. And I don't want you to kick me out. I don't want you to tell me, but I don't know what to do, and I'm scared. And I just like, again, poured it all out. And I remember in those moments, my parents responded in a way that I think was one of my first tangible glimpses of the Heavenly Father. And it's also something I model a lot of my own advice now for parents off of, truly, because they received me in a way that was just so, I think, led by the Spirit. They didn't condemn me. Like my parents didn't pull out a catechism and be like, you know, CCC 2357 through 2359 says this about you gays, or like, you know, they didn't pull out Leviticus and be like, thou shalt not lie with man. Like it wasn't anything like that. And they also didn't necessarily point me in a specific direction for my sexuality. Like it wasn't like they also like pulled out a pride flag and was like, you know, bring us home a son-in-law, or like, you know, whatever. Like it wasn't like anything like that either. They actually said nothing. They literally just held me while I was crying. Like I just wept, and my dad held me and pressed me against his chest, and my mom was around us, like putting her arms around us, and we just cried together. And that was it. We just wept. And like, so when I look back on it, like so indicative of the Heavenly Father, right? That he meets us and is unafraid to meet us amidst our brokenness, our mess, our grit, whatever that looks like, right? He doesn't let us stay there per se, but he meets us there. He's not afraid to. And I was so met there that day. Yeah, and then afterwards, I remember it was like conversation ended, felt kind of weird about it. And then a few days later, my dad, kind of in awkward dad style, was like, hey, son, so do you want to talk about what happened the other day? And he was just so polite and like totally kind about it. And again, he like very politely asked my consent about this. Like he didn't at all force this on me, but he was like, hey, we had a close family friend who was a priest. He was like an uncle to us. He would come over often. And he was like, hey, do you want to talk to Father so-and-so just about everything that's going on? Like, do you want to just like talk to a priest about it? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, again, I truly did not feel pressure. I was just like, yeah, let's do it. So I meet with this priest, and I remember while he was telling me about church teachings, just again, like chastity and church loves you, it calls you this specific, everyone's called a chastity, for you it would look like this, whatever, like telling me all these things. And I remember while he was telling me all this, I was like thinking to myself, like, I have been hiding for so long, in specific because I was so scared of it coming back to my mom and dad, and like my mom and dad finding out and responding really negatively. But I remember being like, wait, mom and dad now know. And like, we're good, which is a good thing. But then it was like, why am I hiding still? And I remember as this priest was like saying these things, I remember literally like one year out there, like just thinking to myself like, oh, I can't wait to start like doing my thing now. Like, like I was just like, and who can blame me? It was kind of like, I mean, respectfully, the church's teachings sound really boring and really like chastity sounds like it sucks. So like, I'm really excited to now do my own thing. And because now I know like my parents still love me. People can still be nice to me. So like, we're good. And so I remember like after this priest, my dad was like, how was it, dude? Like, how'd it go? And I was just like, yeah, it was great. Oh my gosh, I loved it. And I remember I started that summer and then going into senior year, so around like 16, 17 at this point, I started coming out to people, which I don't think is bad. Like it was good that I started feeling like I could share with people. I started telling my friends, those closest to me, those who weren't as close to me. I remember I started telling, like I remember it was like one of those things where it was like I was telling everybody because I just wanted people to know because I felt so enslaved prior and so captive to myself prior that I just wanted people to know about like now, like I was free to like be like, this is like who I am. And this is like my experience. This is my reality. And like, I don't care if you care because like, this is who I am. I remember by senior year, I started dating guys. I had like my first, like, it was honestly like kind of like, honestly like a movie, like my first kind of like high school romance with a dude. And it was like really cute and like, just like really movie-esque, very like Fault in Our Stars kind of. I remember I helped start the LGBT plus Alliance Club at my high school. Yeah, and it was just very much so like, again, like just kind of like, well, this is me and this is the way I want to live my life. And I don't really, like I cared what people thought, but I also didn't. I was still going to mass too. I was still like actively living a sacramental life because my parents kind of made me, but like also like I did think there was still a deep care for God and a deep yearning for him. I just, again, was like, I don't know what that's going to look like though. So I'm going to try my own thing because I don't really see anything else in the church that seems attractive and appealing. So I'm just going to try and figure this out on my own. Yeah. And this continued into like, then I ended up doing local community college in Dallas for about 2.5 years. And while I was doing like in community college, going to school locally too, I just continued, right, to just like, I was dating guys, I was going to mass, I started going to like gay clubs and like drag bars and just like really explored like just like kind of I guess like some different flavors and tables of like secular LGBT plus spaces. And I do want to be clear that that's not the case for everyone. And not everyone feels the need to go to drag bars, to go to gay clubs, or to or even like, be dating this guy after the next, that was just my story. And I just, because it looked fun. And honestly, like to a degree, it was fun. It was enjoyable. I really don't like when people tell their testimonies, specifically about past sins, and they act like everything was just like pit of hell, miserable, and they hated it. And like, they kept doing it for like years and years and decades, but they hated it. Like really, like, it's like, no, like I can, maybe some of them did. I can't discredit, but like, at least for me, like I didn't hate myself for my life. Like I wasn't unhappy. Like I definitely had plenty of moments of happiness. And I think it's totally possible and totally real that tons of people who are not living lives in congruence to the church, whether it's in regards to sexuality or elsewhere, like happiness is still available to them too. And even like God can still glimpse his face and glimpse his love to them in those spaces too. You're right. Like he reaches each of us mysteriously. So like, yeah, while I was not in full sacramental union with the church per se, or in full moral congruence with the church's teachings on sexuality, amongst other things too, right? Because also, I'm gonna be so real, I was also like, the way I was living out my sexuality, like dating guys, I don't know, like even like just what that all looked like, that was just the tip of the iceberg. Like I was also a college kid, whether you're gay or straight, whether you're attracted to the same sex or not. In college, there's also just so much other temptation, right? To drink, to party, to be selfish, to be prideful, to be greedy. I was all those things. And it wasn't because I was attracted to guys, it was just because I was in college. And I just wanted to experience what the world had to offer. And I wanted to feel free, and I wanted to feel good, and I wanted to be liked, and I wanted to be popular. And so like, yeah, it's like, it was so much stuff. It wasn't just homosexuality. It wasn't just, dating guys. It was like so many things in my life. But even then, like amidst that, I'm not gonna sit here and act like I wasn't happy to a degree. Like I was, my life felt good. Like I felt like I had good friends. I had good friends. I had people who willed my good, I think, to the degree they knew. But like, I think with all this, it's important to note that I definitely don't think I knew joy. Because joy is a person, right? He has a name, it's Jesus Christ. And I wasn't actively pursuing Jesus. And again, this isn't to say it's because I was in a specific framework of living or pursuing a certain way of life. It was more like I literally was not like, I would go to mass on Sundays, but it was just because I had to. Like whether I was attracted to guys or not, whether I was sleeping with guys or not, like at the end of the day, I was like going to mass and just going through the motions because I was just going through the motions, And so for me, yeah, it was like I wasn't actively pursuing any kind of relationship with the eternal. I wasn't actively, intentionally really trying to like understand like, God, who are you and who am I, right? And this went on for, again, like 2 years. And so at this point, I was probably like 20 years old when then the Lord spoke to me. It was really dramatic because again, it's kind of funny. It's like Jesus meets us where we are, and he speaks the language he knows that we can understand. And he knew, the Lord's like, look, this is my son who is so beautifully and delightfully made, a little exaggerated. So I'm going to speak to him in this way, and that's okay. That's beautiful. And so I remember one night I was sleeping, and I literally had this dream of, it was like my heart. It was a heart of flesh, and it was like in this body of water. It was like this dark body of water, almost like an ocean, and it was sinking really quickly, like stone. Like it was just like going down. And I remember being filled with this like fear of the Lord. And people hear that and they immediately, or some will immediately get defensive, right? Of like, oh, God isn't supposed to scare you. God's not, And it wasn't like that. Like, I don't know how to describe it. It's not that I was scared of God. It was almost like he like, kind of like the veil was thinned on my eyes, and I kind of just saw where the state of my soul. And I didn't like what I saw. And again, I want to be so clear. I'm not saying that this is because or a byproduct of me dating guys, me doing this, me doing that, like again, there were so many different, like all of those played parts. Like it was like in general, just so many different sins in my life. That I was just like filled with this like kind of like, actually with scripture test you even, is like a holy fear of the Lord, right? We see that in scripture of like, it can be the start and the foundation for really firm faith. And I was filled with this like really holy and pure in the sense of like, it wasn't like anything was forced on me. It was just kind of like whoa, like I saw my soul and I was like, whoa, I don't like the person I'm becoming. Or I don't know if I'd say I'm becoming, rather like, I almost like I knew something, I was made for something else. Maybe that's a better way to phrase it. And it freaked me out. I was so scared. Like, and what I mean by that is like, I didn't know what to do with it. Like, how the heck do you go from like barely going to mass, kind of doing your own thing, like, oh yeah, Jesus is there, I like him, he's cool, to all of a sudden it's like, whoa, like God is calling me. I don't know what to do with that. I'm really scared to think about what to do with that, because that could mean sacrificing certain things, because I know what the church teaches, the Catholic Church teaches about this kind of stuff. Don't want to think about that. Don't want to go there. but I also don't know the alternative. It freaked me out. And I remember there was a couple of weeks during that time where I was really just, again, like, didn't tell anyone that I had this encounter with God or that God revealed something to me. I kind of was just like, kept it to myself, kind of unironically, like going full circle to before when I was suppressing my sexuality. Now it was like, now I'm suppressing this encounter I had with God. And it wasn't until a couple weeks in that my parents actually started noticing something was up. They were like, dude, like, you don't seem like yourself. Are you okay? I just kind of told them, like, again, like, I think God spoke to me. I don't know what to do with this. I'm scared. I'm angry. I'm uncertain. I feel directionless. And like, my parents were awesome again. And they were just like, hey, like, okay, it's okay. Like, hey, as Catholics, we can totally walk you through, like, do you want to maybe, like, again, like, I don't know, talk to a priest, trying to get, like, or, like, get plugged into youth groups, trying to, like, find some kind of support for you in the church at least. And I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds cool. So I remember I, like, got plugged into, like, this one group that was for, actually specifically for men and women who are attracted to the same sex, who are in the church, who are striving to live lives in congruence with the church. So the Catholic Church teaches about chastity for those of us who are attracted to the same sex and pursuing that. And so I remember I got plugged into this apostolate, this ministry, and I went to one of their local groups. And I remember I tried it for a couple weeks, and I remember thinking, like, this sucks. Like, I remember thinking, like, this sounds and looks so miserable. Like, I was like, all these people are old. They seemed really depressed about their lives. They don't seem happy. And I just remember thinking, like, it just looked so miserable. And I remembered even just thinking about my future in the church and being like, this looks so directionless. This looks so vocationless. This looks so supportless. And I was like, this just sounds horrible. Like, and I liked dating guys, and I liked doing my thing. And I want that back. And so I tried the Catholic thing, hated it. And I left. And I was like, you know what? No, like, I'm actually committing to, like, now I don't even not want to be Catholic. Actually, like, I don't even want to be Catholic now. And I remember summer 2018, I think did the most exploration outside the church that I'd ever done in multiple realms, right? I think morally, I was, like, seeking in ways that I never sought before, and just in terms of, like, in other people, and, like, just in all kinds of different things. I think theology-wise, I started looking, I'm from the South, from Texas, so there's a lot of flavors of Christianity down there, right? And so I went to different churches, right, different denominations. Some maybe upheld traditional Christian sexual ethics on this topic, right? So regarding, like, chastity, abstinence, things like that. Marriage between one man and one woman, things like that. So I went to some churches like that. I also went to some Christian churches who were like, just like, no, it's okay. Like, you date a guy, or, like, marriage isn't exclusively between one man and one woman. Like, kind of, like, broaden their understanding or their, like, interpretation of that. So I went to both. Like, I really explored everything. And I just remember, like, during this whole time feeling so distant from God and being so angry at him. Like, it was this interesting, like, I felt like I had glimpsed his face. I didn't necessarily like what I saw, but I kind of wanted more of it. But I kind of didn't want to get closer. And I kind of felt like the ways that I needed to get closer, like the ways that I particularly felt like I was called to get closer, specifically through the Catholic Church, were just ways that I thought were unfair and not entirely my choice. And, like, and it just felt extremely restricted. But all the while, what was so cool, even looking back at that time, was Jesus was so intentionally present with me there. And he was so there. But again, I can't see that until now, looking back. But it didn't feel like that. And then October of 2018, I again had this really dramatic encounter with the Lord in my bedroom. I remember it was kind of another dream. I don't even know if I'd call it a dream. It was more like a heart image or like a vision. Like, I saw, like, I don't know how to describe it. But yeah, I just basically heard the Father's voice, if we're being straight up. Like, I just heard this Father, like this, like, God that sounded like Father, like a tender caretaker, who just very tenderly spoke into my heart, like the depths of my being. It was like this very clear, like, son, I need you and I want you to come home. Like, I need you here with me. Like, come home. Like, I want you here. And then the second thing I heard was, like, time is short. Like time is running out, time is short. And so that night I was so mad and so confused. I was like, Lord God, whatever you are, eternal entity, stop harassing me. Like I remember like it was like Chris Tomlin says you are so good. You're a good father, apparently. We all know that bop. But you know what I'm saying? Like I was like, Lord, like I hear you're really good. Everyone seems to love you, or at least a lot of people seem to. You don't seem good to me. Tonight and moving forward, like you need to do something radical in my life. Like something needs to spark in my heart. And I need to be convinced of this, or else like I'm gonna give the rest of my life to letting people know you're a liar, you're not who you say you are, and you're just, you're not who you say you are. And that night, I was on my bedroom floor again. I was just like angry. I was crying out. And I will say, I think it was one of the first real prayers I think I ever cried and prayed from like the depths of my heart. Just like this desperate, like, I hate you and I'm mad at you and I don't like you and I don't want to like you, but I think I'm supposed to. Just this really real prayer. I think one of the most authentic prayers I've ever prayed in my life. Just bearing to the Lord, to God, to the eternal, to whatever, just like, give me something. And I do believe that night there was a little grace that started to sneak into my heart. I'm not gonna act like that night things drastically changed. I'm not gonna act like that night I radically had a lifestyle change or I radically started, pursuing the Lord and like running away from all kinds of sin. Like it wasn't like it was a very gradual, it was like grace was planted. I think a seed was planted that night, and very gradually and still continuously, that seed is now being is blooming and blossoming into whatever this is now. So I think as weeks progressed, again, it kind of looked like, I think it started with a little openness to God, a little openness to scripture, a little openness to the Catholic Church, where it's like, okay, there was this a little bit less hostility, a little bit less defensiveness, and a little more openness, where it's like, okay, Lord, you weren't invalidating how I was feeling before, but now I'm at a place where I want to kind of just listen and actually understand, or at least try to understand what the heck this all means in the vision of the church. So I started, looking into, researching. I started reading about church teachings on sexuality, but also other things, like the Eucharist, like the Mass, just understanding why Catholics believe what they believe. So I was doing a lot of deep dives on, church teachings. I was starting to read scripture more. I started getting interested in, going to Mass more, and just, trying to understand. Again, trying to just try out the Catholic thing again. And this was also happening, I will be clear, while I was still hanging out with the same people, though, still kind of doing some of the same things I was doing. Again, it wasn't an overnight behavior switch. Everything was still, it was coexisting, but there was at least something trying to happen. And it got to a point where eventually, I think about, 2 months in, I kind of did come to a place where I was like, okay, I do think I understand, or at least understand better, the church's teaching on sexuality, and I want to try out this whole chastity, abstinence, whatever thing. So, it looked like, okay, Lord, I want to start trying this out. I want to start figuring out what this looks like in the grand scheme of my life, and whether or not things actually need to change or need to look different in regards to the way I relate to my sexuality, the way I express that with other men, with other people, just in general. And I remembered, I guess it is, relevant with that. I felt the need to kind of share my story, because I was kind of looking around the church and I was like, where are people like me? I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to a youth group now, I'm getting involved. But again, the people I met who were like me seemed old and they didn't like their lives. The people I know who are my age don't understand nearly what I'm going through. So I was kind of I want to find other people like me. And I felt called to, too, by the Lord. I felt genuinely convicted to just share my story. So I remember that Christmas, so this is 2 months in at this point, we're at December 2018, I asked for a camera for Christmas. And January of 2019, I sat in my bedroom. I just turned on my camera, and I didn't really know what I was gonna say. I didn't come in with a particular agenda. I was just I'm just trying to pursue the Lord, and I'm attracted to men, and I'm trying to live a life in congruence to the Catholic Church. So, in accordance with chastity and, abstinence for me particularly. And I was just is anyone out there like me? I would love to know. And I slowly, but very intensely started connecting with people. People from all over the world were reaching out to me, and being oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was alone. Even if it wasn't, they were particularly looking at chastity, it was nonetheless, they were still like, I'm still trying to navigate this. And I was like looking for someone like me. So I started connecting, I started meeting people. And it was actually really, I think looking back, I trust in the Lord's timing, but a part of me does think it was really early on my journey, if I'm being so frank. But another part of me is like, nonetheless, it did connect me with people that helped me kind of ease in. But at the same time, while that was happening, I also, because I was now posting public videos on YouTube, because it went from a testimony video to then more videos. I started posting more videos just about sexuality and the faith, and channel started growing. And, with that, then my friends started to see, and people started to notice. And I lost a lot of friends along the way. And I want to be very clear, I'm not victimizing myself or making it seem like it was their fault. Because I think a lot of my friends truly were trying to love me the best they could and where they were. I just think a lot of them didn't share the same framework I had. They didn't share the same mindset I had. They weren't looking at the same things. And so of course they were like, what are you doing? Like, this is crazy. I remember I was so, I like people who I knew for years and years, like over text were like, you've like literally been brainwashed by religion. And like, I'll see you when you come back. But again, it hurt, it was painful, but looking back, I have no resentment towards them. Because I also think it was part of what needed to happen. Because just as those friends started to, like that community started to slowly dissipate in my life. And by community, I want to clarify, I just mean like, again, all the different friends I had in college, gay, straight, whatever, like it didn't matter, just people I had. As that community started to dissipate, the Lord filled it with new community, with people who were like-minded, who were just like, look at the same goal of like heaven, sainthood, holiness, like wanted like a Christian, lives in congruence with just Christian morality. So it was interesting how as that community faded, the Lord replenished. That looked kind of partially online through, again, my channel, also through, I got plugged into a Catholic ministry called Eden Invitation, where they also introduced me. It's online in person, but I had a lot of online friends through that. That continued a couple months into my journey until then eventually I discerned that I wanted to transfer. Because I was in community college, I kind of at that point was like, I wanted to go to a different school anyway, because community college, you can only be there for so long. So I need to start figuring out new schools. So eventually I started discerning, I want to go somewhere with a good Catholic presence, whether that was a public university that had a really strong Newman Center or like a Catholic school. And I checked out a couple. There was two in particular that I was really torn between. It was Texas A&M, because the St. Mary's community there is awesome, or so I've heard, and then Franciscan University of Steubenville. And I remember I visited both. I actually, when I visited Franciscan, felt so not drawn to it, like at least tangibly. Like I was like, this place is like in this dinky old town in Ohio, and it's like everyone here is really weird and happy and kind of creepy. And like, I was just like, I was like, this place kind of freaks me out. But I remember my heart just felt a tug of like, this is where, like I literally cried to my parents because I was like, I don't want to go here, but I know I need to go here. And it was one of those moments of many where it's like, Lord, I know your plans and I don't really like them, but I know that's what I need to do. But eventually, so I transferred fall of 2019 to Franciscan University of Steubenville. And it was just, why I bring this up is as I was in school, I just continued then again to not only have community of like-minded, disciples pursuing the Lord and virtue and all those things like online, but now it was like in person. I was meeting, I had classmates. I joined a fraternity or a household, as they're called at Franciscan. I started getting involved on campus. Like I started then experiencing tangible in-person community of people who were my age, who wanted the Lord and were trying to navigate that, especially in regards to sexuality, whether that, again, was like being attracted to same sex or just opposite sex or whatever, wherever you were. So I was at Franciscan. I ended up doing, I was plugged into a lot of, like ministries, a lot of communities that were local to the Steubenville area. I also continued to post online because, again, I saw, I think, this deep need that very naturally and organically, just my heart being an empath, being a man of empathy, I was just like, my heart broke for the church and was also like eager to like speak into this because I saw like there were so many disciples like me who I met at Franciscan who also like just I met as well online or who I knew personally in my own life that were just like, I too am like attracted to same sex. I too am gay, or I too maybe I'm like trying to navigate like just what sexuality looks like in the grand scheme, like coming from a passive sexual sin and like now navigating like reconciling that with the Lord and reconciling that with like a life of chastity. Like it was like all these different areas of relevancy and relating to that I was seeing in the church. I was like, or seeing in others around me that I didn't see in the church. That I was like, okay, somebody needs to speak into these things and somebody needs to talk about this. And so I kept posting online. Eventually I started a blog site. And slowly it actually turned weirdly into a speaking, like a public speaking / public presence online in the church as well. So it was this weird, like simultaneous coupling of like, I was posting online, I was speaking publicly, but I also was a college student who was trying to figure this out himself. And I also was like on college, like involved in all these things, like involved with my friends. It was like all these different things balancing at once, right? I was at Franciscan. My undergrad was in social work. Love my Catholic social workers. So I ended up doing my undergrad in social work. I graduated from Franciscan in 2022 with my bachelor's in social work. And then I ended up actually staying at Franciscan for another 3 years, actually, because then the university offered me a job to be a campus minister, to work in the Office of Evangelization there while getting my master's degree in catechetics and evangelization. So that's what I then did for the next 3 years. So it was a total of like 5.5 years at Franciscan University of Steubenville. And I want to emphasize too, that last 3 years too, while I was a campus minister, I also was running a group, a community on Franciscan's campus for students like me, for like-minded disciples who were young, who had LGBT plus experiences themselves and who were seeking to just make sense of it and live lives in congruence with the church. So it was all this stuff, right, that I want to be clear about, that like, in many ways, when I look at my conversion and my coming home to the church, because by the grace of God now, this past October, to timestamp this, was 7 years of, that initial conversation with the Lord in my bedroom, so like committing to him, crying out to him. So it's been like over 7 years now. And my journey has been an interesting one, being back in the church. I want to be totally transparent and totally honest and humble here, that it's looked very different than the average person. Not every person converts or reverts back to the Catholic faith and then is on stage giving talks, or then is running groups on their campus, or even is then going to a Catholic university that has an abundance of the sacramental access and Catholic community. And, it's like, in many ways, I was very spoiled, right? But in many ways, it's exactly, I believe, that what the Lord wanted me to have. I can't also be mad at him for having that. It was no one's fault. And it also wasn't inherently bad. Like, I was given so many beautiful friendships, so much beautiful access to the sacraments, so many beautiful spiritual mentors and guides who really healed my perspective of God and the church and my role and my presence here in the Catholic Church as a man attracted to other men. So I'm not mad at it and I don't regret it. However, I want to emphasize something that's been really pertinent for me, especially I think in the last 2 years of my life, as I've just grown in my adulthood, as I've left Franciscan and explored what life looks like outside of this Catholic, Disneyland, right? The reality is, y'all, that we're 7 years in of me walking with Jesus, trying to just, and we're 7 years in of me just walking with Jesus as a disciple who's attracted to other men, striving to live in congruence with the Catholic Church's teachings on all things, right? And, it really comes down to that prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, where he's looking at the cross and he just says, like, Lord, who are you and who am I? Like, that's what this past 7 years has been. I think it's what the next 7 years is going to be and what the rest of my life is going to be. I'm like, Lord Jesus, like, now that I'm not, the walls have come down a bit, and like, I know you love people like me, and I know I'm safe with you, or at least I'm trying to believe that. Like, tell me who you are and who I am. And that's been painful. That's been messy. There have been seasons where I have really been mad at God in these past 7 years. There have been seasons where I've resented him again, where I've not prayed for days, weeks, months even, like where I've avoided him. It's been painful. There have been times when I've looked at the church around me and been like, what am I doing here? There have been times when I've looked at the call to chastity and I've been like, what am I doing here? It is not an overnight conversion. Conversion is ongoing, right? That word metanoia that we hear all the time, like ongoing conversion, it's true. Like I'm not gonna be perfect. I'm not gonna be a saint until like the next side of heaven, until it's fully revealed in that next side of heaven. And to be honest, I think the sainthood actually is found in the midst of that longing and that searching and that seeking and that failing and that getting back up and that crying, like all of these past 7 years for me. My life looks very different now, right? I haven't dated a guy in, like 8 years at this point. My lips are parched, right? I haven't, gotten involved. Like, again, but it goes way beyond dating guys too. I think I haven't, I don't like so many things from my past that I haven't, necessarily gotten back into in years and years, right? There are also other things from my past though that I have gotten back into, or it's things that I still struggle with to this day, right? Or that I'm still trying to reconcile with the Lord with, right? But especially because of the fact that I don't have a romantic companion or a sexual companion, like community is huge for me, right? My friends are huge for me. I'm surrounding myself with disciples who root me in my sonship, who root me in my place in the church, who remind me of God's goodness when I lose sight of it. Like, that's huge for me. So at Franciscan, I have my friends. Post-Franciscan, I have my friends, my local friends, my friends that we keep in touch from afar. I've now gotten really involved again with Eid Invitation. I actually work there now, full circle moment with that ministry where I'm now surrounded by a bunch of disciples with LGBT plus experiences who share in this friendship and share, again, like support is huge for me now. My community is huge for me now. I try to pursue the sacraments, right? I try to live a sacramental life in congruence with the church. I go to Mass regularly. I pursue confession, but I'm also not doing it in a radically crazy way. I'm not going to receive the Eucharist 3 times a day. We actually can't even do that as Catholics, technically. I'm not going to confession 4 times a week. It's like, I also want to be real of like, it's ongoing and I'm not a perfect Catholic. Like just because I'm not dating guys now, or just because I strive to be chaste, or just because I strive to be humble, or just because I strive to this or that, like doesn't mean my life now looks perfect. It doesn't mean now I'm perfectly sinless or spotless. It doesn't mean I don't still want those things. It doesn't mean sometimes I don't still look back at those things or even go back to grasp them. I think the difference now, where I am now versus where I was 7 years ago, where I was before that 7 years, like just in general, is that now I'm continuing to know and understand a God who loves me. And I'm really, truly coming to believe that he does love me. I'm really, truly coming to believe in that love. And that he loves people like me, that he loves each and every one of us, that we're all unrepeatable people with unrepeatable stories, that it's complex, that there's nuance, but that's the beauty of it. But ultimately, I think coming from this place of like a deepened and continued deepening understanding of God's love for me, I think it's helped me to come to a better understanding of who I am, of who the other person is, and ultimately of like what this is even all about, what it means to be Catholic, what it means to be a disciple of the Lord, what the gospel means, what it means to spread the gospel to every corner, to all people. It's all about love. And it's all about response to that love. I know that's super abstract, but like truly like that's what this past 7 years has looked like for me, and that's where things are different, where things are gonna continue to look different. I'm still attracted to guys. I might be for the rest of my life, kind of not the point. Like at the end of the day, what's different about me now is that I am actively trying to look each day at the face of my God and just ask him again that question, like, who are you, Lord, and who am I? And what does that look like today for me? In my sexuality, but also in other things in my life, in my relationships, in my job, in my finances, in my hobbies, in my presence to people. What does that look like, Jesus? And Lord, forgive me for the times I fail. Forgive me for the times I failed to be the person you've created me to be, failed to respond to the love that you've revealed to me today, or failed to look at that love. It's a beautiful place to be. It's messy, it's painful. But gosh, it's beautiful, and he is good.